Hello. Thanks so much for joining today or listening to this after whenever you're seeing this. Today we're going to be talking about courage. And what I've been doing lately, people ask me like, how do you pick the topics for these shows that you do? And really what I do is I think about topics that will impact your career that you don't necessarily connect with your success. And in fact, season 3 of my podcast is a similar theme. And then I sort of, consider myself a net for catching issues that come up with clients repetitively. And it's really interesting because, like, all of a sudden I'll get a cluster of a certain topic that comes up. And there's a psychological phenomenon around this called the cognitive bias or frequency bias. So when you start to see something, you see it everywhere. And so what I've been hearing about lately is courage. And so that's why I wanted to talk about courage and how courage can actually make you more successful. Having courage, practicing courage can make you more successful. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And of course, as I mentioned with this cognitive bias, I was putting my thoughts together and preparing for this meeting. This morning, I had a really cool conversation with a client, and courage came up. So we talked about some techniques and things she can use, and we may talk about that later. Okay. So I'm going to make a pitch for courage makes you more successful, and I'm going to build my case. I'm going to tell you some things you can do to practice it, and I'm going to give you the reasons why I believe this, and hopefully it's helpful for you. So courage in general, it can make you grow. It can make you more successful. It can make you more resilient for sure. And believe it or not, it can make you happier. And like many worthwhile things, it can be hard, but you can learn how to do it and you can get more comfortable doing it. So my thesis here is that it's worth trying. And when courage is applied to your career, it really involves taking some actions that sometimes can deviate from like a more traditional linear path that you might be thinking about. And it can feel uncomfortable because you're doing something that may feel like you're swimming upstream or may just be something that you haven't done before. But when you think about it, the discomfort is worth it because the potential payoff is significant. And we're not talking wild, reckless courage and going some crazy way, but we're talking calculated risks. We're talking about weighing the cost, the potential downside, the promising upside, and deciding when it's time to take that leap and do something that feels like it requires a lot of courage to do it. But you don't know the outcome. If you knew the outcome, it wouldn't require courage. So, together we can go there. Okay. So how can you build this professional courage? It really is critical to your growth because I talk to clients about this all the time. If you're staying in your safe zone, if you're staying where you're comfortable, you're not growing as much. You're not trying new things. You're not flexing new muscles. And the flip side of that is if you want to grow, you have to be willing to step into that area of discomfort outside of your comfort zone, where that is where growth happens. And the more you can be aware of that and take that on and use courage to push there, the more you can grow. So, and some people could even become like courage junkies or discomfort junkies, and recognizing the value in that space really, like bring it on. I think that's pretty cool. It's also courage is also a really fundamental element of leading because you don't always have the answer. And you may have to stand up for a principle or a project initiative, a budget cut, whatever that is. You may have to stand up for that with your team. And it does require courage. And it requires, the courage of your conviction, the courage to build the case to support what you need to support, the willingness and courage to convince the team and bring them along with you. It does require discomfort. Um, but the thing to be aware of is sometimes that discomfort alone can almost be enough of a reason to hold us back from taking action. It's funny, I think about like my dog with an invisible fence, and she knows when she gets close to that, like that the beep that she hears and the slight shock that she'll feel if she crosses the line, that's enough to keep her back. And discomfort and the need to take courage is almost like that. At first, that fear can really hold us back and can keep us a little bit paralyzed. But as you get comfortable with it, you can step into that discomfort zone. One thing to keep in mind is courage isn't the absence of fear. It isn't ignoring fear. It's taking action in the presence of that fear. And like taking it on head on. And again, you can get good at it the more you do it. But something to keep in mind is you have to be kind to yourself. You have to take it on recognizing that you haven't done it before. Success isn't guaranteed. Be ready to make mid-course corrections if you need to increase your probability of success. Most things we don't do perfectly the first time. You need some practice, and this, taking bold action and being courageous is no different. Um, and obviously, one of the things that we want to do is I mentioned calculated risks. I mentioned, weighing the potential upside and the potential downside. Obviously, we are trying to make bold choices while eliminate anything that's career limiting. And most mistakes, if made once, are not career limiting. So you can let go of that. But it really does require some careful risk assessment, which requires awareness of yourself and the situation around you. And it requires a little bit of finesse and diplomacy, as do many of the things that we do in corporate life. So those are things to keep in mind too. Courage is very much related to decision making because most some of the time there's group consensus, everyone's in agreement with the way to go and you go. Doesn't require a lot of courage because you've got a team with you and there may even be some group think for good and for bad going on. But if the decision that you've made takes you in a different direction than the mainstream or is something that you're trying for the first time, like you can see this in a group, on a team. Sometimes if there's something that you're doing for the first time, people literally or figuratively look around and take the temperature and see where others are and sort of jump on the bandwagon once it's established. You as the leader have to take courageous action at times to set that direction and possibly stand up to challenge. So it really is definitely related to decision making. And, it's kind of interesting because thinking about reflecting on ourselves as leaders and how do we take on courageous action. There was a study done by Carnegie Mellon University that found that people actually overestimate their willingness and ability and likelihood to take courageous action when faced with what they defined as a risky situation. So thinking about it's not enough because we overestimate our ability to take that action. Courage is built through action, through repetition, through practice, through intentionality of that action. So, the more you experience it, the more you can build on it. So, I guess my message here is just because you're thinking that you're going to or you have taken courageous action, if this university study was correct, you may be overestimating what you've actually done. Actually taking specific action, practicing that, repeating it is the way to do it and to sort of close that gap of your action and what you're estimating the action to be. Now, what can you do if you're not feeling the courage or you're feeling like you need to tap into it to a greater degree? Some people use some, sort of tricks or mindset adjustments in order to start to flex that muscle. And this was the conversation I had with the client today. She was feeling, this is a C-suite executive. She's a very accomplished person, a very impressive person. And she still experiences sort of that little voice that holds her back, that keeps her feeling small and that keeps her from taking bold action, especially when she's in situations that bring up a stress reaction with her. Like for in her case, it might be when she's dealing with the board of directors, which she has to do and she has to influence them. So we talked about some tricks that she can use to start to develop that muscle of courage, if you will. And here's two simple ones. Well, I say they're simple because I've practiced them a lot. I offer them to you as simple places to start. The first is act as though, what would I do if I was feeling courageous here? What would I do if I was taking bold action here? And think it through ahead and think, because in that way you can be very purposeful about the actions you choose to take. So sort of imagining, what would I do if? Give it a try. Here's another one. Pretend that you are advocating, negotiating, standing up for someone that you really admire, someone that you really believe in, someone that you genuinely like. In that way, it feels less personal, and you are advocating almost for a thing or another being rather than on your own behalf. So eventually you want to sort of stop playing that game, if you will, but that can be a great place to start. Now, think about what I said for that example. You want to be advocating or standing up for someone that you admire, that you believe in, that you really like. Well, here's the truth, that person is you. So, depersonalize a little bit as you're flexing that muscle and working on that skill, but then recognize that this person is you. It is someone you believe in and you like and you support and you would advocate for. So once you close that gap, you can end up in a really beautiful place. So that's 2 tricks to try. And I promise you that once you start doing it and you practice it and you see a little bit of success, it's easier to keep going to try again. So give it a shot. And if you want to talk through your experience, if you're having trouble getting off the dime or whatever, you know where to find me. I'm happy to talk those things through with you because I've seen them work. Okay, so if you still need to be convinced, I want to talk about some of the benefits of taking courageous action in the workplace. Because again, this will make you more successful. So think about what you're doing when you're taking bold action. If you're being authentic, you are working absolutely in alignment with your values, which will make you happier, will make you more satisfied, will make you more fulfilled in your career, and will make it easier to do again because what you're doing is true for you. So that really does lead to a feeling of integrity and happiness. Taking bold action also will continue your growth and improvement. We talked already about the fact that in order to grow, you need to get into that discomfort zone and you need to get through that. That's where growth happens. It takes courage to do it. So it really does allow you to continue to grow and improve and take on the next hard thing. It really does. Courage also, I mentioned that it will help you step out of your comfort zone. Now, the examples that I gave are sort of pre-planned within yourself. I want to do this. I have to be willing to get uncomfortable. I have to embrace that, and then I can break through. That's great. That's a great way to go. But this discomfort zone sometimes comes up when you least expect it or when you didn't plan it. Like in the example of this C-suite executive I met this morning, she does an excellent job of planning out the points that she wants to make, whether it's to the board, whether it's to analysts, that kind of thing. She's like really tight on that. But the questions you can't predict. And sometimes those can cause that stress reaction in you that can make you freeze a little bit. So the more you practice getting out of your comfort zone in ways you can control, the easier it is to deal with it when you're forced out of your comfort zone in a way that you may not have chosen. So it definitely is beneficial for you there and helping you think on your feet and all of that. And really provides you with greater perspective and expanded experience set because you will be drawn into, you will be willing to go places you haven't gone before. And I tend to think that similar to how did I come up with the topic of courage? Like I was seeing it all around me because I was seeing it in themes in my clients. It's a similar kind of thing. If you can get comfortable getting uncomfortable, you will find opportunities to practice that as you go on, and it just sort of feeds on itself. Leads to courage. You have to draw on that courage, which builds resilience, and that resilience is really helpful in leadership because you won't feel stuck when you're handed a problem that you maybe never have encountered before. You will see yourself as someone who's resilient and good at solving problems, even if that means pulling somebody in on your team who's the real problem solver. You started that action and helped move towards solutions. So that resilience really serves you well. Currents can currents Courage can also enhance your credibility. Huh? How'd you come up with that one? It really does, because you will be seen as someone who stands up for your values, who's willing to take a stand for sometimes the hard things. And other people really respect that and will come to you when they either need to learn how to do that themselves or they need support for a tough action or something like that. It really does improve your standing within your network and build your credibility. And courage leads to courage, which may sound repetitive, but if you think about it, it really builds a cycle in the very best way. Because when you stand up for yourself, when you stand up for something you believe in and you're successful, it makes it that much easier to do it again. So courage really does lead to courage. Now, sometimes you're going to take courageous act and it's not going to work out. Okay. There's still a lot to be learned from that so that you can make some shifts, change some things so that the next time your probability of success is improved. And you'll make sure that you're not making the same, I'm going to call it a mistake again, only because the outcome didn't work. But if you really learn from it, it's not a mistake. And one other thing that strikes me as a benefit of courage is that courage is optimistic because you're taking on something in the unknown. You're going into this. Nobody takes a courageous act thinking it's going to fail. Well, I shouldn't say nobody, but almost nobody takes on a courageous act thinking that it's going to fail. You go into this courageous situation optimistic that it's going to work, willing to make the adjustments, look around, bring in the resources you need to increase your probability of success. All of those are optimistic actions, and that really creates great ripples in the pond in your workplace, in people seeing the optimism and seeing the opportunities. So you can really be a leader for that. And when you take action in the face of adversity and when you persevere, which requires courage, you are moving forward in that optimistic way and you are creating a brighter future for those around you. It becomes contagious. You are a force for good in your community and in your network. I feel like I'm getting a little grandiose here, but I really believe this. I've seen it work. And so, think about courageous actions, big or small, as having a positive influence on those around you. Courage is fuel for your success as well as your thriving and your happiness and being a positive influence for those around you and those that you're trying to develop. So there's my case for taking courageous action in the workplace, really to fuel your success, to fuel your happiness and your fulfillment. Okay, so I talked to a couple folks about the fact that we were going to be talking about courage today, and I got a couple of questions that I thought I would serve up in case there are things that you're thinking about too. So one of the questions I got was, all right, I'm faced with this situation that feels like it's going to require courage, but I don't feel the confidence that I need to really take a bold stand. How do I develop that confidence? Which I think is a great question because, like, once you've done it before, it's easier to sort of pull on those reserves of confidence. But if you're really not feeling it and you're in an area where you've never done it before, it's hard to do. And that's the first thing I would say is acknowledge that this is hard to do something you don't know how to do. So be kind to yourself. And for a lot of people, the question was asked in a way of, how do I build confidence to take action? For a lot of people, it's the exact opposite. Taking the action can build the confidence. So go back to the tips that I mentioned before about what would be the action that I would take here be if I was feeling confident, and follow that path. So reverse it on yourself. You don't need the confidence to do it. You need to do it to build the confidence. And sometimes getting the support of another person in the planning of it or afterwards in the debriefing of it can be really helpful. So pull in some support around you if you need it. So another question I got was, somebody said, yeah, courage. Okay, great. But I feel more comfortable playing it safe. Is that wrong? No, there's very few things that are wrong. It depends on the situation. There are times to play it safe. If you're in what is risky or even toxic, unsafe work environment, sometimes playing it safe is the best thing to do until the situation changes, or you can make a change that works for you. So is it wrong to play it safe? Absolutely not. But there's a cost because it's going to keep you where you are and it's going to keep you from growing. So I would just say, assess the situation, and see whether the time is right, whether playing it safe is the wise thing to do, and how comfortable are you going to feel playing it safe versus taking that bold move. Another question: is courage required for leadership? I say yes. I say yes, because if you're not doing anything different, if you're not pulling people along towards something new, towards a new vision, a new project or whatever, you're staying really safe. It's not really leadership. So I think in some ways, courage is part of the definition of leadership. So if you aspire to that, building this courage muscle is definitely worthwhile. If it's so uncomfortable for you that it freezes you, it's either work through that, and there are ways to do it, or maybe a leadership role isn't right for you, and it's not right for everybody. But yes, I would say courage is required for leadership, for good leadership. And the last question that I got was, okay, so what if I build the case? I develop the courage, I do all the things, I take that bold action, and I screw it up, or the outcome misses or something. And that can happen. I mean, it doesn't require courage if you know exactly what's going to happen. So by definition, you're taking a little bit of a risk, and you're not guaranteed of the outcome. So look, sometimes there are uh, things that we miss that really are very costly. But most of the time, if you take the appropriate response to it, it's a learning opportunity. So, in the best of cultures, you don't pretend it didn't happen. You don't pretend you never took it on. You do the debrief, you work with other folks, you try and learn what you can from it, and then decide if you make some of those changes, is it worth trying again? Or is the lesson maybe a little bit more painful of, yeah, we're not doing that again. We're going to try a different path. So that's what I would say is most of the time you can recover from it. The only time I think I've seen that you really can't recover from it in the right environment is if you don't do anything to learn from it and you just try the same thing and make the same mistake again. Like, the second time, I would call it a mistake. The first time, it might just be something that didn't work. So, that's my 2 cents. If you have other questions that didn't get answered here, or it's brought up other thoughts for you, or you don't agree with me, I'd love to hear from you. So, you know where to reach me here on LinkedIn or through YouTube or through my website. Let me know what you're thinking. All the best.